We don't have our usual
That's right.
intro.
We don't have Dexter, so we're losing some of our production value. As many of you probably know, there's a lot of things happening in the world right now, including power outages and rolling power outages, and so Dexter's been struggling with that ever since the middle of the night. So with that in mind, we're probably going to have a bit of abbreviated podcast here, just in case any of us lose power in the next 15 minutes, which who knows?
Right. Yeah.
Y'all-
So it's more specifically than just a lot going on in the world. There's a lot going on in Dallas right now.
Totally.
So, yeah. So we'll keep this short. And friends, if we drop off, you'll know what happened. It means that the power grid decided that it was our
We're
time.
done.
So
You are done. You have allotted your amount of time, and you are done.
But yeah, so yesterday was the last Sunday of our series, Love Local. If you did not get a chance to worship with us, you can check that out on our YouTube channel, on our Facebook. So make sure you catch up with that. It was a service that actually was not live. We do live services as often as we can.
As often
but
as we
did
can.
decide to go ahead and pre-record because we wanted our staff to stay safe, and I was appreciative of not having to drive yesterday morning. So
yeah, I think it was a good call, right? Because
yeah,
you never know. People, I feel like in Dallas, often we get really in a tizzy about weather, and it's always like, really, is that going to happen? And we went ahead and made the call. Let's go ahead and pre-record, and I'm really glad we did, because I'm glad you don't have to drive down in the snow that was happening. And it wasn't terrible yesterday morning, but it wasn't great either, right? So,
right. Yeah, it was much better to know that we had it done and know that it was good quality, instead of all of us arriving ragged and late from navigating icy roads. So,
well, it was good quality until I had a hiccup, but it's fine.
Yeah. So walk us through what happened. This is the behind the scenes, right?
This is behind the scenes. So typically, if we're not in person, sometimes Dexter still goes up to the church and runs it. Sometimes I run it from my house on our worship computer that we have. And so I had my laptop up, I had the worship laptop up, and I had plugged the power cord into my laptop as opposed to the worship laptop. And so it made it on a power until the last word of your sermon.
Yep.
And then it died.
It was literally the last word. You are not exaggerating. Yeah. It was I was singing the song by Seren, and I was saying, "Don't forget to," and then it froze.
So don't forget to, you get to fill in the blank.
It's such a cliffhanger, guys.
Right.
So, but yeah, we got it back up. But yeah, so I mean, we started with the Sunday sit down with your friend, acquaintance, colleague Bill, who was fantastic. He had so much to bring to that conversation.
Wasn't that awesome? He really is a gift, and he's a cohort leader for a cohort that I'm in through Texas Methodist Foundation. And I mean, we've only met once as a cohort. We meet again next week, but we have had to do some independent conversations with him as well. And every time I talk to him, he's one of those people you walk away with and you feel like, I'm a better person because of the conversation we just had. And I feel that way every time we talk, and I get to be in his presence, even if it's virtual. And I felt that way for sure with the sit down this week.
Yeah. I always I do not have this gift, so I appreciate it, especially in others. His ability to, I would love to hear him preach week in and week out, because his ability to weave history into our present day in a way that's interesting and relevant. I had a lot of good teachers, so it's not my teacher's fault, but I just never really clicked with history. But I appreciate people who, I mean, you can tell he's so passionate about it. And so, history is not history. It's still happening. It's still playing out, and it was really neat.
Yeah, I thought he was great. And then I thought it just led in really well to the service as a whole. I struggled pretty hard to figure out who would be a good person to sit down with for this kind of wrap up, because I feel like it was such a big wrap up. We covered a whole lot in the course of the 5 weeks leading up to it.
Yeah.
And then, like you said in the service, right? It's Transfiguration Sunday.
Right.
It was the wrap up of our 6-week series all about discipleship. And then it was also Valentine's Day,
right.
And not that we're going to spend a whole lot of time celebrating Valentine's Day, but it would be silly to not at least acknowledge it, right? As a church. So
yeah, I mean, I think Victoria did a really cool job of that in children's time.
Yeah.
but yeah, we got a lot of good comments on Bill's talk with you. Like Lindsay just said, he was great, you know.
Yep.
But yeah, right. I mean, I was struggling as I was writing my sermon. How in the world do I thread this needle of Transfiguration Sunday? So we have the text in Mark and we have the text in Corinthians. And then we have the fact that it's a wrap up of the series.
Yep.
And more broadly, we have the fact that it's the wrap up of the time in our liturgical calendar, which is a fancy way of saying our church worship calendar. That yesterday wrapped up the time from Christmas until Lent starts. So we're diving into Lent in 2 days. And so Transfiguration Sunday kind of works as it's sort of the Fat Tuesday of Sundays. I can't remember if I said that last week in our podcast too, but it's like, it's a celebratory Sunday, and it prepares us. It gives us a little bit of a boost, some momentum, if you will, going into Lent, right? So I always try to have that Sunday be very high energy, you know, really relatable, really practical in some ways, not in a self-helpy way, but in a like when you're going up a hill, you got to get a little bit of momentum to get up the hill of Lent.
Got to have a little steam to get in there. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's what yesterday was for me.
No, I felt that for sure. And I mean, I told you this whenever I knew what you were preaching on. Like that song that you sang that's one of my favorite go-to albums.
Mm-hmm,
I forget the name of the album actually. Is it their self-titled album maybe? Anyway.
No, I think it's We Will All Be Changed.
We Will All Be Changed.
Hold on.
I don't even know how to pronounce her name correctly. I always say Saren, but I don't know if that's the right way to say it.
I think it's Seren. Oh, the album is
S-E-R-
called This Is Where We Are.
Seryn.
Yeah, because sarin is a poisonous gas. So I would think
good.
I think that's Seren. But I'm not sure. So
what was the name of the title? Here, I'll put it in the chat so everybody can have it.
This Is Where We Are.
There we go.
Yep. It's a good album.
They're also a North Texas band. I think they all went to UNT, and like it's just this good stuff. But anyway, yeah. So I was excited that you were referencing that. I thought the music in it was great. I love that, you know, people were commenting on the handbells. I know it popped back into the service right in the middle of the handbell for the offertory, but I thought that was cool addition to the service.
Yeah. You'll have to, maybe we can like post that on our social media, just the handbell piece by itself, so that people can hear the whole thing, because it did cut off about a third of it. So
yeah,
I was so proud of them. It's a lot of work to play handbells anyway. It's a very different skill set than playing pretty much any other instrument.
Yeah.
But especially over Zoom. So
no, for sure. I'll do that. I think I have that file, so I can go back and post it so everybody can check it out. You can find it. Well, we'll have it on our Facebook. Maybe by the end of the day, if I'm not having blackouts.
Yeah, it's a good reminder though. I mean, it is okay for us to just take some time off. if the universe, where the close of the Dallas energy system says you need to take some time, then we should just take some time.
Well, and this is kind of a side note, but you know, one of the things we've been working on over the weekend, as well as like getting worship for yesterday, is like I even know Mitchell, even though he's on paternity leave, has been kind of working a lot behind the scenes right now to make sure people are sheltered downtown in the convention center in Dallas.
Yeah.
And so we've been raising money to make sure people are fed down there as well. So if you're interested, you can give at our wrumc.org/emergency. And we're gonna keep feeding people. I know we're scheduled to feed up through Wednesday because they're gonna house people as long as it's below freezing.
Yeah.
And so we're doing that behind the scenes. But I also thought like I need to get as much scheduled to get out like as much as I can now so that I can be ready. Like I have a couple friends over here in Hollywood Heights, which is like the next neighborhood over, who have been without power since 2:00 this morning. And so they're like, one of them has a 5-month-old baby too, and so they're like, kind of struggling to stay warm. Their house has dropped below 50 degrees. So anyway, like it's just a good reminder that like, you know, there's a lot that happens in the world, and we do a lot of things in the church, and worship is a really important part of it. But then like, oh, there's also people who are freezing literally and need to be fed. And so that's part of the work of the church too. So yeah, it's,
you know what that reminds me of too, though, is so Bill in his Sunday sit down was talking about, I'm not sure I'm going to get his quote exactly right, but he said something like, worship is the entryway into the mysterious life of agape love with God. And so I just love that. And I wanted to sit there for a moment because I do think that people can pretty easily fall into um, the untrue need, like the perceived need to separate their worship life from the rest of their life.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we worship at church, but that's not as important as feeding the hungry or making sure they don't freeze. And I would say we worship at church and we feed the hungry and make sure they
That's
don't
right.
freeze, right? That's how we wake up to God in our lives, so that we know how to follow God and recognize God's voice. And so I just really loved that. I want to sit with that a while longer, of worship as an entryway.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not a beginning, middle, and end on Sunday morning. It is the first step of the rest of your week.
Yeah. And it's not this, like you said, it's not this thing that ends all of a sudden whenever, 11:50 or whatever hits, but worship continues throughout the week. And it's all kinds of almost at different sides of a coin, but it's more than that too, right? Like it's this continual stream and flow and process. And I think that's what I know I ended up preaching that the week on worship, whatever, but like this idea of worshiping in spirit and truth is way more than just we gather for an hour on Sunday kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's what I tried to touch on in my sermon too. I didn't spend long there, but I hope that people got it when I said, how are we being called to lay aside our personal preferences? That's one of the
Yeah.
most important things to me when I guide people in worship, is to say, I phrase it as, how are we changing the question? How are we changing the
Yeah.
question from what do I like? What do I think is important? What kind of music resonates with me? Instead, how are we changing the question to, how is God moving? How is God
Yeah.
speaking to the person next to me, or the person in the next house over, if we're not next to each other physically?
Sure.
So I just think that's really important to acknowledge, is worship is not about our preferences. Worship is awakening us to how God is already moving.
Yeah. Which at the same time, though, people clearly have preferences, right? So what is your response to those who are like, well, I just don't like that kind of music, or I just don't like like.
I say that's okay. You don't have to
Yeah.
like everything. I choose anthems for our choir that I don't particularly like, because I know that style of music is one of many that completes the mosaic picture of the way we worship. And when people come to me and they say, well, I don't like that hymn, I wish we could do more old hymns, or I wish we could do less old hymns, I would say, I hear that, I appreciate that, and you're more than welcome to have all these opinions. I want to invite you, though, also to ask, why are we singing this hymn? Is there something in the text that I can learn from? Or is there something that my neighbor really needs? Even if I don't like that hymn, is there something that my neighbor really needs from it right now?
Yeah.
And there's a selflessness, there's an emptying when we can, to put it bluntly, when we can get over ourselves, right?
Right. Totally.
I love serving a church where we don't have the quote unquote worship wars. We use traditional hymnody, and we use global hymnody, and we use folk music, and we use secular music. And I know some colleagues who have balked at the fact that we will sing secular songs in church. Like, well, that's not godly. And I'm thinking, but why not?
Who are you to call unclean that which I have made clean?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's an important question we have to ask, is like, how do we get over ourselves? How do I get over myself? I'll just say, stick here so as not to offend anybody.
Sure.
And say, on the one hand, it doesn't really matter what I like if I'm waking up to what God's doing.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom, who I don't know if she's on this morning, she might not be. She might be in rolling blackouts too. But she often says, like, she just always really appreciates the diversity we have of music. Like you said, there's the folk band, there's a hymn, there's I'm going to say choir, even if it's an ensemble or whatever at this point. And then then there's handbells, and and I know worship is more than just music, but I do really appreciate that there's such a diverse aspect to it. And like you said, there's no worship wars there, because there's a little bit of everything. And I'm even like, sometimes whenever you do some global music things, and I'm like, I have no idea what's happening right now, but like, I don't have to, right? Like,
exactly.
I have experienced in some travels like global worship that's way different than what I'm used to, and often this is the like the academic part of me where I end up doing more observing and like not criticizing, but just like taking in,
Sure.
as
Yeah.
opposed to like putting me in a state of worship. But like, why is that not a state of worship in and of itself, right? Like watching people worship in a different way is still like an appreciation for the beauty and the connectedness that we all worship, period, right? Like we're all
Hmm.
worshiping. And so
Hmm.
like it's just a different way to look at it. And so I'm
And
gonna go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's a both and too, because I don't want to paint the picture that we should be miserable in worship. We should not. It
Sure.
should be joyful. And I hope that by doing a large swath of different styles of music, and we bounce back and forth in different styles of liturgy, right? You did at Prayers of the
Absolutely.
People, um, which was
That
different.
and almost 9 minutes long.
Yeah, it was super long. That's okay.
It's
We
so
need some
long.
we need some prayer in our lives. It's all right. Um,
Did not
but
realize it was that long at the time.
we did, Prayers of the People is a different structure than a pastoral prayer. And if y'all don't know the difference, very simply, Prayers of the People it brings in that response element. So it's
Mhm.
shorter petitions, and then it invites us all to say together, something like, God, in your mercy, hear our prayer, or God, we love you, or it can be anything, but it's a back and forth as
Yeah.
opposed to a pastoral prayer, which is more just like you'd think of a traditional, church person prayer.
Right.
Um, and my hope is that everyone gets nourished and also inspired to nourish others.
Yeah. Totally. And again, I think, like I said, it's more than just music. Like you said, there's the diversity of liturgy and
Yeah.
even the different voices that you do a really great job of continuing to bring in multitude of voices from our congregation, and even like the sermons, right? Like I know Mitchell preaches the majority of our sermons, but even with him being out, it was never a question of like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Well, no, there's other great people to preach too, and it may not be the same that Mitchell preaches, but everybody has something to say, and
Mm,
that's the beauty of it, is that it's. Can I say this? You texted me. You're like,
I was
what?
just about to say that.
You're like, what? We should just had Bill preach. Like, how am I going to follow this? Or something like that. Whenever you were doing the sit down, but like my response to you was like, well, the brilliance is that you too have something to say, and
Yeah.
it's a wonderful word. And honestly, like, well, I think Bill was great, and I think everybody appreciated what he had to say. Like, there's people in our congregation who way more appreciate you and what you have to say, because of the relationship too, right? Like, not that the content was better or worse, but it just resonates so much because people know you and know your heart, and like the content was good as well, and they know you. So like, there's that added bonus of like, that I think in this day and age, there's so much content out there in the world right now. The difference being is that whenever you have a personal connection, it's almost like having a guide in the
Mm,
content with you, and that's what we miss so often. Is like, I can pull up a sermon from, who knows where, by whoever, and like it may be phenomenal, and he may be a phenomenal, or she may be a phenomenal rhetoric and all that kind of stuff. But like, if I don't know that person, it doesn't always hit me as well as if I know that person. So I don't know. There's a brilliance in that too, and that's what the beauty of this community is that we do know one another, and we are invested in the well-being of each other.
yeah.
And I think it just runs way deeper that way.
I think what I hoped to do from my sermon, which was very short, it was more in the homily territory. It was like
Yeah,
what,
totally.
15 minutes?
14. I think it was 14 or 15. Yeah.
Um, but one of our congregants texted me right after service, and they said, "How did you know I got mad at my spouse for forgetting something from Albertsons?" And I was like, "I
Caught.
did not know that. I just truly am speaking from my own experiences and trying to
Yeah.
make it as sometimes the mundane speaks to us more than the cosmically important, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's more about those daily, have I seen my elderly neighbor in a week? Do I need to go check on them?
Yep.
Or have I spent all day serving at a nonprofit, but then I come home and I'm grouchy toward my husband or wife? So
Well, and then again, the reality is there is no cosmically important without the mundane.
exactly. Yeah.
They're so intertwined.
Mhm.
Um, and that's sometimes what worship calls us back to also, is the recognition that, this all is intertwined and we are all connected. And so I thought it was a beautiful Sunday. I'm sorry that I cut off the last word of your sermon and part of the handbells. I'll be sure to get that out there.
It's such a cliffhanger. Don't forget to
Don't
fill 'em.
forget to stay warm. Don't forget to stay warm.
Yeah, really. Oh, goodness.
Yeah. I know, right?
Well, I know we wanted to keep this short just in case,
Yeah.
our power went out or your friends needed to come seek
I
shelter,
know.
but
Right. There's one
Um,
other thing in the chat. David mentioned a second ago. I just want to mention this real fast because I thought this was a great word. He said, "I love this chat. God is within us,"
mhm.
and that makes me reference back to the what we've been concluding scripture readings with this lately.
Yeah.
For the word of God in scripture, for the word of God among us, for the word of God within us.
Yep.
And so, David, thanks for that. I think that's a really great reminder. And, even in spaces like this, even as if this is lesser, but like God is within us and God is among us wherever we are and whatever we're doing, especially if we're willing to open our eyes and our minds and our hearts to see God in those spaces. So,
Mhm.
Rebecca, I'm grateful for you for all that you do to create and craft such beautiful liturgies and worship for us and for preaching yesterday, and then for this conversation too, because it's a good opportunity for me to keep my eyes open for God.
Yeah, absolutely. And Diane commented too. She said, I think that's always the question. How do I get over myself? Yeah, that's something that I try to ask more often. I don't ask as often as I should, but
Totally. Yep. It's a tough one.
so to wrap up, if you all would be interested in donating, once again, can we show
Oh,
that
yeah.
website? So
I-
wrumc.org/emergency if you want to donate to help feed the folks who are trying to get out of the weather. And then also join us in 2 days, this Wednesday at 7 p.m. for our Ash Wednesday service. And you might very well have to dig through inches of snow to get to the soil that you're supposed to have on Wednesday. So
This was not exactly what we intended when we planned this idea, right?
it's all right.
Oh, yeah. And then if you want to do the planting thing too, right? Then you can also plant something, and we mentioned this in worship, and I'll go ahead and put it in the chat as well. But Linton Landscape is the hashtag we're going to use with the pictures. I actually posted a picture of tulips yesterday with the hashtag just to get it going. And here's the book that we're going to use for the book study, going along with it. 24 Hours to Change the World, 40-day reflection. It's this really weird little square shape or whatever, but you can pick it up at local bookstores. You can pick it up on Amazon, wherever, if you want to do the whole Amazon game. So we hope you'll join us. We hope Lent will be like you said, sometimes you got to ramp up to get into Lent, right? And there's a lot that's happened in the world over the last year since we all started during Lent last year.
Mhm.
So let's, it's not always about giving something up in Lent. Sometimes it's about taking something else on and something that will be life-giving. So yeah, I think I'm ready for Lent. I think it's a good time.
It's gonna be good. It's gonna be good. Well, thank you, everyone. Stay warm. Please reach out if you need any assistance. If you don't have power, you need anything, don't have food, you need anything,
Totally.
just please don't hesitate to reach out because we are here for you and with you.
Yep, and we'll do our best to help out wherever we can. So blessings, everybody. Rebecca, stay warm.
Take care.
Yep, we'll see y'all soon.